Hello everybody, it's Cara. My channel is Wilde Book Garden. Thank you so much to Literary Gladiators for having me on again. And my topic for today's video is kind of like tips or kinds of books that are good to get into nonfiction. I know a lot of people can feel very intimidated about getting into nonfiction. I know I definitely was for a very long time. I do have some recommendations on books and on kinds of books that might make great ways to kind of dip your toes in. I have them in a few different categories. So the first one is not so much a specific category as just a general tip, and it sounds very obvious, but it's about finding books that are a specific interest of yours. Like for a while I thought that I didn't like nonfiction because it had to read like a textbook and that it couldn't be about things that I personally found interesting. Like I kind of thought it had to be like serious nonfiction, meaning like subjects that you would take in high school or something. But one thing that got me into nonfiction was reading about like the fashion industry and beauty and cosmetics and like the history of that and the politics of that. That's something that I've been very interested in for a while now. And so when I started getting into those books, it made me realize that I can actually really enjoy nonfiction. Like this is Beauty and Cosmetics 1550 to 1950 by Sarah Jane Downing, which I really loved. And if that is an interest of yours, I would definitely recommend this book. But in general, I just wanted to say, like, find specific topics or kinds of things that you find interesting, and I pretty much can guarantee there's nonfiction about that somewhere. My second tip or category is to read nonfiction intended for younger readers. That can be for kids or for young adults, and there can be a lot of great information for like adults and older readers as well. Like I think the really good nonfiction for kids doesn't like talk down to its audience, and it can still be, in my opinion, interesting for adult readers. I've read a lot of middle grade like nonfiction that I really love, like the History Smashers series I really enjoy. This one is The Underground Railroad by Kate Messner and Gwendolyn Hooks, and the way it's organized, it is like it's designed to be very approachable for kids, but just in general for people who aren't used to nonfiction. Like there's like kind of graphic novel sections, the way it's organized, there's like a lot of illustrations, and like the text is broken up a lot, and this is still real nonfiction. Like just because it's more enjoyable or approachable than other kinds of books, it doesn't mean that it's like not actually teaching you something. So I would recommend that series. There's also a ton of books that are like illustrated, like nonfiction kind of compendium books almost. Like one I read recently was Amazing Muslims Who Changed the World, Extraordinary Stories of Incredible People by Burhana Islam, which is by a bunch of different illustrators, and the art styles are just absolutely gorgeous. Let me see if I can find some. And so there's quite a lot of these like nonfiction books that are kind of a compilation of a lot of different people on a particular like topic. Like obviously this one is about different Muslim people throughout history, and once again, these are great for kids, but they're also great for older readers. Like I definitely learned a lot from this. Another example of this kind of book is Rejected Princesses by Jason Porath, Tales of History's Boldest Heroines, Hellions, and Heretics. Also got some great illustrations here, and like a really diverse array of like time periods, countries, like kinds of women, and yeah, just really love this book. This one is also great because it includes like kind of content notes at the beginning of each story, so that if you are reading this to kids, you can kind of know in advance if there's going to be like certain kinds of violence or anything. So this one is also great. And I also wanted to mention Stamped by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi. This is the adaptation of Stamped from the Beginning. So this is the version that is intended for younger readers. I listened to this on audio. Jason Reynolds narrates it, and I think that was fantastic. If audio is an option for you, I would really recommend that. Like I struggle with audiobooks and I still really enjoyed that. And this is a great example of how it is directed towards younger readers, but the information is not dumbed down at all. And I definitely learned a lot from it. And I've also heard this is a great like introductory one before you get to Stamped from the Beginning. So I definitely wanted to make sure to read this one first. My next category is very short, like single essays. There's a few of these that are out there. One of them is Why You Should Read Children's Books Even Though You Are So Old and Wise by Catherine Rundell. This is a very tiny essay that is just about what it says in the title. I'm very passionate about the importance of adults reading books for younger readers and about younger readers or younger characters, and I think she writes beautifully and concisely and cleverly. I'm not sure that's an actual word, but I really love the writing of this, and I love the way that she communicates so many things that I have tried to articulate, and yeah, I recommend this for its content, but also for it being a really great way to just barely dip your toes into nonfiction, because this is a fantastic essay. And then one I read more recently is I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shraya. This is a book by a trans woman, a short essay by a trans woman about her experience of masculinity, having that like enforced on her, and then just like the way that that has affected her in different parts of her life. It talks a lot about toxic masculinity, and it talks a lot about this is like a great essay because it is very approachable and short, but it still covers a lot of different topics. Like, it's obviously not trying to be an in-depth like dive, you know, into all these different topics because it is so short, but even considering that, I feel like it gives enough detail and enough insight for all of these different and very interesting ideas. So I would really recommend that. Then another one I would recommend is nonfiction that kind of has easy to digest like sections or chapters. Like one that I really loved that I know a lot of people have been loving is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I thought this was a really heartfelt, smart, thoughtful collection of essays. I have not had the best luck with his fiction, but I would say, like, even if you didn't, I would still recommend this book because it worked for me. I think it's pretty much been working for people across the board, regardless of how they felt about his fiction. But the reason I think this is a great starter book, besides just being really engaging and really interesting and the premise being so interesting, is like, you know, John Green reviewing different aspects of the human experience, like giving a star rating and having an essay about that, it's very easy to dip in and out of because there are these different essays and sections in it. And then another category is kind of like unusual formats for nonfiction that people might not necessarily think about. So one that I really love is Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson. This is her memoir in verse that is for middle grade readers, and all of those things I think are things that people don't often think of going together. And I think this would be great for people who are new to poetry or to nonfiction, because it's not at all intimidating. The way she writes is so smooth and clear and easy to understand, but it's still like very beautiful in its simplicity. And it's not a long read because it is in verse, but I just really loved this. This was the first Jacqueline Woodson book I read, and it was instantly enough to get me fully on board the Jacqueline Woodson bandwagon. I just really loved this one. And then another interesting format would be graphic novels. I recently read They Call This Enemy, written by George Takei, Justin Eisinger, Stephen Scott, and then art by Harmony Becker. This is a memoir about George Takei's childhood growing up in an internment camp in the US during World War II, and how that influenced his later life and activism. And I just think this is so well done, so important, and the way it's written I think is very easy to follow. I tend to have trouble with a lot of different graphic novels, but this one was very easy for me to follow. So in that sense, I think it's a great starter for graphic novels or for nonfiction. And I think this is another example of how nonfiction doesn't have to feel like reading a textbook, you know? And then another one I would mention, I guess this could also go in the short essays category, but Light for the World to See by Kwame Alexander. I listened to this one on audio as well, and it's very short. I think the subtitle is like 1,000 Words on Race and Hope. And it's really beautifully told. This is kind of a blend of nonfiction and poetry, but again, kind of like in an essay format. And it's about the history and present of racism in the US, and it's about like mourning for the past and the present and all the harm that has happened and continues to happen, but there is also hope for the future. And I think the way it balances those things is really well done, and I would really recommend that essay as well. And then finally, the last kind of category or tip that I have is like picking up nonfiction books that are kind of more casual. Maybe they're funny, or maybe they're just more like personal feeling. And I have a few different examples of that. So one of them is The Lazy Historian's Guide to the Wives of Henry VIII by Gillian Hamilton. And this one is very funny in the way it's written, but it also conveys a lot of great information. I know humor can be very like individual, you know, like the same kind of humor won't work for everybody, but I really enjoyed this. I thought it was cleverly written, but again, it had good information. And I also appreciate that even though the tone was very funny overall, it did still give the seriousness to the serious issues, you know, that they deserved. And if you've ever been at all interested in like English history, you know, The Wives of Henry VIII, if you're a fan of the Six musical, or if you're looking to get into nonfiction, I would really recommend that. I also have I'd Rather Be Reading. The Delights and Dilemmas of the Reading Life by Anne Bogle. This is a very short little book that is basically a bunch of tiny micro essays, and it's very like warm feeling and very intimate and very engaging. I think anybody who is a lover of books would probably find something to enjoy in this, and I know there's a lot of books that are described as a love letter to books or a love letter to readers, and for me this is one of the ones that lives up to that. It talks about so many wonderful things related to books, like about like the importance of libraries, about finding the perfect book at the perfect time, about like books that make you cry, like all kinds of things that I just really connected with and really loved. And this one is one that is written in a very personal and approachable way. So I would recommend this for that category. And there are also certain kinds of memoirs that I would put in this category, and for various reasons. One I have is Go Back to Where You Came From and Other Helpful Recommendations on How to Become American by Wajahat Ali. And this is so good. So this is a combination of memoir and kind of like history of the US in some ways. Wajahat Ali talks about his life growing up as a child of South Asian immigrants and being Muslim, and especially after 9/11 and what that was like. But it also talks about the wider history of America, especially as it relates to like xenophobia, racism, Islamophobia. But this is another book that I think balances that heaviness with hope in a really, really beautiful and compelling way. But another reason I put this in this category is not only is the writing approachable, but it's really, really funny. I think Ali is a hilarious writer. I actually laughed out loud multiple times while reading this book, and that's difficult to do for me. I just would highly recommend this. I think it's a great example of a memoir, but it also talks about these really interesting and serious topics, but it's also very funny and engaging. So would definitely recommend that. And then the last one for this category is not funny at all in the way it's written, but it is still, I think, very intimate and very personal. So that's why I put it in this category. And that is I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. And this is about Austin Channing Brown's experience as a Black woman in the US. And it deals with race and racism, and specifically it deals a lot with like the racism in like progressive spaces, including in like churches and like the jobs that she's had in different churches that are trying to be, they say they're trying to be inclusive, but is that actually what happens? And I love the way that Austin Channing Brown writes. Again, it is very personal. I think the way she conveys her ideas is just so well written. Yeah, so this one is not like humorous in the way it's told, but I put it in this category because I do think it is very intimate, and it feels very conversational in a way. Like I think that those kinds of nonfiction can be more approachable. You know, they feel like somebody talking to you rather than you sit down and like read a textbook or a history book or something. But you do still learn a lot of really great information, and you do learn about history just in a more approachable way, I think. Okay, so those are some recommendations I have on different kinds of books and a few specific examples of how you can get into nonfiction. Like I said, I was intimidated by nonfiction for the longest time, but now I read a lot more of it. I've found some that I really, really love, and I think it's just about like finding things that interest you, finding styles that interest you and that don't feel so intimidating. And yeah, so these are some specific examples. Obviously, these are not the only ones, but I thought I would recommend a few particular books that I really loved and that I think are good examples of these categories. So please comment down below, let me know if you are going to pick any of these up, or maybe you've already read them. And thank you again to Literary Gladiators for having me on their channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!